Good day, everyone. I am Wendell Abarquez of CTU Barili Campus, taking up Bachelor of Secondary Education major in English. And for this video, I will be sharing to you my own comparison between children and adults literature. So that is through or with graphic organizers. So to make this comparison possible, I have read yesterday and on the other day three children's literature and two adults literature. So without further ado, let's get to it. And here is my graphic organizer. So at this moment, I will be telling to you first what makes children's literature different from adults literature. So based on those stories I have read yesterday and on the other day, children's literature in terms of theme and the idea of the story are way simpler compared to adults literature. This is because our children did not have yet that very open minded when it comes to the ideas and the themes of the story. Some themes of the stories are very sensual for their age. So that is why their literature were made simpler in terms of the theme and the idea for them also to easily follow and predict what is the story all about. Next, in the choice of words or vocabularies, um, children's literature are way easier. Again, this is for them to better understand what the story is telling. So it is very difficult for them if you use those confusing words and maybe they will misinterpret the whole story. So, third one, in terms of the length, it is shorter compared to adults literature. Why? Because children's our as what we have known, children has have a short span of interest or a short span of being focused on a certain thing. Their attention span is very short. That's it. So that is why it is very important to make the children's literature shorter as much as possible, but or without compromising also the whole story itself. Next, it is clear and direct to the point. I mean, there are, unlike from the adults literature, which we can found a lot of twists, complex stories or plotting of the story, children's literature is direct to the point. So it goes smoothly and easily to what the story wants the children to learn in the end or as a moral lesson. So next, as much as possible and mostly children's literature and also based on what I have read, it is adventure field. So um, adventures stories really catches the attention of our children, of our young readers, since they are fan of playing, they are fan of role playing, so it will really suit for their interest. So they like fairy tales, so wicked witches and magics, so that is why also it must be, or most of the children's literature are adventure filled fantasy. And lastly, children's literature are way creative in terms of the illustration. So why? Because children's obviously likes pictures. They like to see pictures on what they've read. Because children has to have two purposes in reading. First, they want the story, or second, they just want to look onto the pictures, the picture itself, the illustration. So that is why to catch their attention, it is way better if the literature, children's literature, has that creative illustration compared to adults literature. So that is all about for the children's literature. So now let's move on to the adults literature. What makes adults literature different from the children's literature? So first, compared to children's literature, our adults literature has complex or complicated themes. The story is complicated, and we love that types of stories. That those stories that we thought that this will it would end like this, but in the end, oh, there is a surprise. I mean, there were a lot of surprises in a story. So next, adults literature is or has mature um, language in terms of vocabularies. The choice of words are more mature. So some writers had written there a double meaning word, or some of the words were really needs to be interpreted deeply. And next, in terms of the length, it is way longer compared to children's literature. Some or most of the stories are way longer. This is because to really elaborate what the story is all about. And sometimes um, it is because of the plotting of the story and the twists. A lot of twists. So if there were a lot of twists, so the story must be will be way longer. And it doesn't matter for us anymore because what we are as an adult, we wanted to read the story because we are interested to it and we want the message and the whole story itself, not just because of enjoyment or having fun, just like the children's literature. So next, it has a lot of twists. There were a lot of surprising events that may occur in the body of the story as we read the whole story. So a lot of twists like this, like this, like this. You will be surprised in the whole story. So that makes the adults literature way more exciting, in a way more interesting for us adults compared to those children's literature. And next, themes are more serious and sensitive, as what I have said. um, Now we are the adults literature are made to adults, obviously. So and as adults we can now handle a more serious themes and more sensitive themes, and it in this way also it can really help us to look on what is the reality. Also, it is now more onto fantasy. It is now more on what is the reality, whether it is sensitive or it is an SPG an SPG themed story. So what is important here is that we do understand the story and it is more realistic. Next, it is way more give more emphasis on the message rather than the illustrations. So as what I have mentioned earlier, children's literature are way creative in their illustration because to catch their interest, but in the adults literature it is different. Now we focused on what the story really is. So what is the story telling us, not the illustrations that we can see as we read or as what we can watch as we watch the story or listen the story, what we can hear. So it is now more on moral lessons we are up to and the message of the story, not the illustration. So next, lastly, it is way more realistic. So most of the children's literature are um, fairy tales and adventure field, or mostly fantasies. Now in adults literature, mostly these literatures gives moral lesson. It needs to be or it must be in realistic so that it will really it will really be able it will as readers we will really get hooked with it, and we can use it in our real life situation. So that's it. That is how I compare adults literature to children's literature. Now I include two similarities, and I wrote two similarities between adults and children's literature, though they were very many um, characteristics that makes this literature different from each other, but there were still two that makes them the same. First, it provides entertainment. Whether it is fantasy or realistic, it is entertaining us. It gives us a lot of enjoyment as we read or listen the story. And lastly, it always gives moral lesson, and that is one of the most important thing in making or reading a story. It is not just the characters, the twist, the plotting of the story, but more onto what we can learn from that story. So that is all for today, and thank you for watching this video. Hope you've learned something. Bye bye.